I'm Rowan. I am with the Fulbright Commission looking after communications and marketing. I also have Paula here, who is our awards manager. She'll be looking after the chat. So if you have any questions, pop them in there and Paula will kindly curate that. And I also have Dr. Ruth Melia here, who is your Fulbright Campus Ambassador for NUI Galway. She's also a senior clinical psychologist with the HSE. And she'll be speaking later about her Fulbright experience. Okay, so I'll just quickly take you through this presentation. And we also have Grace Mannion here, who kindly helped me organize all of this. Thank you very much, Grace.
No, sorry, I just said I'd turn on my camera to say a quick hello. I want to say thanks very much, Ronan, for joining us today, but I'll hand back to you because you're got started. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. Yeah, so just quickly go through kind of the history of Fulbright, what it's all about. So it was set up by J. William Fulbright back in 1946, and kind of in my mind, kind of the significance of that year is, you know, the world had been through 2 world wars at that stage, and his kind of brainchild was that if we can all do an educational, cultural exchange, people are less likely to end up fighting with each other as much. And okay, and so Fulbright, Ireland joins the Fulbright in 1957. The Irish Commission is set up in 1991, and by the year 2021, 180 countries are in the program. Okay. So Fulbright opportunities, who are they for? So Fulbright is for students, it's for scholars, artists, teachers, professionals, and it's from all disciplines. We do mean all disciplines, and you're going to hear me saying that an awful lot throughout this presentation. And it's to research, study, teach, and lecture in the USA. And there are some of the recent Fulbrighters. Okay. So what do the awards provide? So Fulbright Awards provide a monetary grant, visa administration, accident and emergency insurance, and obviously the cultural and professional programming, and ongoing support and links to a global network of Fulbright alums. So people like Ruth and all of the previous alumni. We have like the Alumni Association with meetups. They're all a friendly bunch. They're always helping each other out, advising each other. So they are a great bunch of people, and they really interact with each other and keep in touch. So we see them quite a lot. As I said, you know, it's kind of lifelong thing. So many Fulbrighters who may be engaged with the program, you know, 20, 30 years ago are still engaged with the current ones who are getting awarded just in, you know, the last couple of months. So there's always that kind of interaction. And it's, you know, it's a global thing as well. You know, there's people coming from, as I said, these 180 countries all going to the US, and then people from the US going out. So it's a huge global network. And we have the Fulbrighter app, and you can interact with people who are kind of in your field, you know, maybe get advice, and it kind of opens a lot of doors, people who interact with Fulbright. And as I mentioned, Ruth is your campus ambassador, and I'll be introducing her later. She'll be speaking to you. But here is her profile, and that's her email address, and you can annoy her with loads of questions if you like. She's very accommodating, and she kind of looks after everything for NUIG. So eligibility for the awards. Okay, so the Irish awards are open to Irish and EU citizens. So you have to have 3 years residency within Ireland. You have to demonstrate a strong rationale, and I'm going to go into much more detail on this later. So it can't be, you know, I want to go to Las Vegas because I like Las Vegas, or, you know, New York because, God, I'd love to go to New York for, you know, 6 months or something like that. It should be something, you know, kind of along the lines of, I need to go to this specific educational institution because, you know, maybe if you're in the science field, they have this specific machine that would be very useful for my research, or, you know, they have this international expert who's going to be able to teach me a lot, and I'm going to be able to teach them a lot, and there's going to be a synergy involved there. So you have to have that strong rationale. And there's a 2-year home rule. So you must comply with the 2-year home rule afterwards. So we always say this, if your intention of going for a Fulbright is to do your Fulbright and then maybe stay in the US afterwards, or stay there forever, you know, maybe even if you get married or something, you do have to come back for 2 years afterwards. So it's not a go there and stay there forever. It's a cultural exchange. So the kind of idea is that you're going to go over, you're going to learn a lot, you're going to be able to bring that back, and, you know, have that cultural exchange, you know, that understanding of a different culture, and bring that back. And so you must for 2 years. So the current way it is, you can do it in Europe, but we can't guarantee that will be an ongoing thing. So, you know, letter of the law, it is you come back to Ireland for 2 years. And okay, and you cannot be a dual US Irish citizen. So if you do have a US passport, that's not going to fly, I am afraid. And you can't be living in the US at the time of the application. So yeah, this goes to the, you know, cultural exchange part. You can't have extensive recent experience of studying or living in the US. And what we mean by kind of recent extensive experiences, you know, you've been there for the last, you know, couple of years studying. So let's say, so someone asked us a question at the end, they were like, oh, you know, I lived in the US for 2 years when I was, you know, the age of 4, and I don't really remember it. That's fine. If you don't remember living there, then you're perfectly eligible. That's kind of the way we would describe it. So, and if you do have any doubts, if you're like, oh, I did spend a bit of time there, but I don't, you know, maybe that'll go against me, reach out to us. We'll be able to advise you on that. So we're quite an approachable bunch. So don't just self-select yourself out just because maybe you did a J1 or somewhere in the US. The application process. So this is kind of what people say about it, that it's a valuable experience just to apply. I think Ruth will probably talk to that a bit in her segment as well. That it's kind of, you know, almost therapeutic to go through it, you know, from your own perspective, and I think you learn a lot by doing it. And then also, you know, if you're selected for the interview, it's I had the pleasure of kind of sitting in on a few of the interviews this year, and they were very interesting. And I'll touch on this a bit later about the format of the interview. You know, there was a lot of so when you apply, you're graded quite a bit on, you know, your research project or your idea, but then in the interview it kind of flips a little bit. You talk an awful lot about yourself, which I thought was kind of refreshing. I was kind of taken aback by that. I was like, they actually really want to get to know you. You know, so Fulbright is it's more than just your research. Okay. So application timeline. And so in August, the applications are open, but don't wait till August. You know, start generating your ideas. You know, don't just leave this webinar saying, August, you know, they open, then I'll have a think about it then. It's good to get the prep in now. You don't want to be rushing your application. Just like anything. October, yeah, so, you know, there's a short enough window here. So, you know, in October the applications close again, and November to December. We get experts from experts that don't know you but who are in your field to review the application. So it's, you know, it's international experts, it's, you know, national ones, but they are they will be reviewing on a technical level your application. Interviews, if you're successful at that stage, you will be interviewed in January or February. I think, geez, yeah, by January or February, we would hope that they would be in-person interviews. There were a lot, you know, everything is Zoom now, but hopefully there will be. And then in March, the offers are made. And as I mentioned, you know, it's time to plan now. So, you know, after this webinar, maybe if you do think Fulbright is for you, to start, you know, reviewing the information on the website. We do have a lot of details. You will have a lot of details in this presentation that I will send out to you afterwards. But have a look through the website, have a dig around, go, oh, actually, maybe I do fit into this. Maybe I should apply for this sponsored award. Maybe I should do this. Just have a dig around on the website, familiar yourself with Fulbright, have a look at the mission statement, and, you know, try and drill down into that, choose your award, find a course and plan your research proposal. So maybe you already have some kind of idea of what you would like to do in the US. You know, start kind of looking at that and plan your research proposal, research what it means to be a Fulbrighter. So this is really, really important, you know, to make sure that Fulbright is for you. Just maybe watch a couple of the videos about other Fulbrighters. There's a few of them on our homepage. So there's some, you know, interesting projects there, interesting people, and then register your interest as well. Okay, so the awards categories, down to the kind of nitty gritty of it. So Paula looks after the Irish Student Awards. So these are for postgraduate research and postgraduate degree programs. We have the Irish Scholar Awards, which is looked after by our colleague Sonia. And this is for academic or professionals, research and lecture. I'm jumping through them now because we're going to go into a little bit more detail about them later. The Irish Tech Impact Awards for academic research, and this is for professional research, and they're both with an ICT focus. And the Irish FLTA Awards, usually when Paula is doing this presentation, she starts speaking Irish here. I'm not going to attempt that. So this is to teach Irish and in the US and take courses. And then the Schumann Awards, which are run by our colleagues in the Belgian office. So this is academic and professional to study, research, and lecture. Okay, Irish Student Awards. So for visiting researchers and degree seeking students, and you must establish an affiliation with for a degree course in the US institution, in a US institution. These are from 4 to 12 months, and the max award for these is €30,000. And yeah, I always do stress the point that that's what the maximum award is. So it is done based on where you're going, how long you're going. So let's say you're going to one of the Dakotas, the cost of living is a little bit less there than if you were going to, let's say, Manhattan. If you're heading to New York, the cost of living is more expensive there. So it is tiered in that way. So don't, apply and then go, I have €30,000 in my back pocket to do what I want in the US. But okay. And then the Scholar Awards. So this is postdoctoral or professionals, and this is in all disciplines. Must possess a PhD or 5 years relevant professional experience. And this is to research and or lecture in the US. Again, establish an affiliation with the US institution. We'll talk about that a little bit later, because I think some people find that kind of daunting. They're like, oh, I don't really, I don't know what institution, don't know how to reach out to them. That's kind of the first hurdle, but there's people who are here to help you, and these are from 3 to 12 months, and the max award is a little bit more on this, so it's €35,000. And then we have the tech impact one. So I touched on this a little bit earlier. You must possess a PhD or 3 to 5 years relevant experience. So these are with an ICT focus. So preference is given to early career researchers. So PhD conferred since 2019. Non-commercial research exploring transformative power of ICT. And we have a couple of profiles of people who've done this award, recent awardees, and I believe, do we have so there's a couple of profiles on the website, and I believe there's one in the Irish Times as well about one of them who went to Boston College. And then again, so on the Irish language, to teach and take classes at designated US colleges. So this is looked after by Paula. On what you get, it includes room, board, tuition fees, stipend, travel and programming in the US. Must have a bachelor's degree, some teaching experience, and obviously fluency in Irish. Awards will be matched. Awardees will be matched with the US institution after the award. So we do pick the institution for you on this one. And yeah, so it's a max 10 months duration. If I'm correct on this, I think you can stay an extra 2 months after that. If Paul, is that correct? Yes, that is correct. Yeah, so you do your 10 months, teaching, and then, maybe a nice travel around a little bit after that. So it's a really nice program. Okay, and then we have sponsored awards, and these ones are ones not to neglect, because I think it can be quite, you're looking through, you go, I'll just apply for the all disciplines, but you maybe would be better suited to apply for one of the sponsored awards. So these are kind of, targeted in certain areas, such as, creativity, cybersecurity, and environment. Have a look through the sponsored awards, because I think people do sometimes neglect to apply for these and apply for the all disciplines. Check through the relevant flyers. You might fit into one of these criteria. And if you do apply for a sponsored award, you are actually eligible. So we will be putting you into the all disciplines as well. So you are eligible for those as well. Okay, so these are the for the sponsored awards for students and scholars, we have the Enterprise Ireland one, which is in innovation of business, the EPA, which is in water, climate change, sustainable environment, the Geological Survey Ireland Award, which is in geosciences. And then we have 3 museum fellowships, which these are the student only awards. And this is the Creative Ireland Museum Fellowships. There's an LLM in law. There's 3 fee waiver options in that. I'm going to be going into a little bit more detail on these anyway, so I'm just kind of listing them off here. And the Teagasc Award, Agriculture, Forestry, Food, Health Impact Award from the Health Research Board for health professionals, and then the NUI Scholar Award for early career postdocs. So this is for NUI graduates. So this will be quite relevant for you. And I would say to read through the flyers on all of these to find out all the I'm not going to go through all the detail on them today. So if you want to find out all the nitty gritty on them, go onto our website, Creative Ireland Scholar Fellowship. So again, these are all Scholar Awards, and Tech Impact for short-term research, and the other one in Boston College that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so the application requirements. Okay, so you're going to have your personal information on your CV, which I'm sure you already have. And then this is kind of something that might be a little bit different in the Fulbright application. So your personal statement or a Fulbright statement. So this is less about your research and more about you. So they want to get to know you. So this is kind of a narrative piece about you, and there's information on our website. So you are more than your CV, you're more than your research project. So this is kind of I like to call it like Fulbrightiness. So this is personal. If you're, let's say, you want to do some kind of cultural thing, let's say you're a really good hurler, maybe you want to explore something in poetry in the city, or you want to do some environmental stuff. It's what inspires you, how do you inspire others, are you a leader, that kind of stuff. And it can be difficult to talk about yourself in that way, and especially if you're applying for jobs or you're applying for grants and things, you generally don't have to talk about these things. But in the Fulbright application you do, and this is kind of how we get to know you. So that's quite an important part. And then your project statement, which is obviously what you will be doing over there from a kind of academic perspective, what you may be researching. 3 recommenders. So yeah, this is why I say start preparing early. Recommenders, people who are maybe lecturers or professional connections who can recommend you. Busy people. So you want to get onto them early, make sure that they're willing to, write a letter of recommendation, and, give them enough time. You don't want to be, a week out from your submission and, have to contact 3 people and go, can you write this immediately? So this is one to get in the bag nice and early. Transcripts for your student applications, passport copy, samples of your work if you're an artist, so 3 hard copies, and then a letter of affiliation. This is for researchers and scholars. Okay. Preparing your application. So, think about it in this. So why is your work groundbreaking? Is it going to bring something new into your field? Maybe you're going to learn something over in the US. Maybe you're going to teach something over there. It is a cultural exchange, an academic exchange. What are you going to bring back? What is it going to do, for your field? Rationale for going to the US, I touched on this earlier. Have a strong, it's got to make sense, because if you could, maybe if you could just do it in Ireland, it has to be a strong rationale for going to the US. So have a think about that. Don't come at it from the perspective of, I'd like to go to the US. Maybe I'll try and fit a Fulbright around that. It should be kind of coming the other way around. Identify the specific areas you want to concentrate on. Explain the research question with objectives, methodologies, and expected results. This is going to come naturally to you guys, but these are kind of pointers for you. What impact will this have in your discipline, research, and your career? Okay. Oops. Yeah, and I touched on this earlier about your personal statement. So don't neglect this. Don't duplicate your research project. Don't copy and paste your LinkedIn profile. Don't do that. Talk about you, and talk about what makes you you. And don't be like, oh God, do they really want to know that I'm really into this specific instrument, or I have this interest group and I want to bring that up. Yeah, that's exactly what we want here. What makes you different? What makes you Fulbright? Diversity and inclusion. So this is something we take extremely seriously. We welcome candidates from underrepresented communities, areas of research, home organizations and HEIs, geographical areas, ethnicities, and ability. And these images on the right, that's just some of the kind of groups, diversity and inclusion groups that are within Fulbright. So if you have a kind of nosy on our social media, you can see we interact with them quite a lot. And people in Fulbright take diversity very seriously. Finding a host. So yeah, this is, so you're going to want to figure out where you want to go in the US and think outside the box. Don't just go, I want to go to Harvard, I want to go to Yale, let's do it. Have a rationale, think broadly. The US is a big place, and it's very culturally diverse. Think about maybe places that are, a bit off the beaten track. So research experts in your field, maybe that will help you navigate to where you want to go. Is there someone in your field that you really admire and they're an expert and you'd really love to work with them, you think you could learn a lot and it would help with your research? Reach out to them, tell them you're applying for a Fulbright. It's gonna, you would be surprised the doors it opens. Ask your mentors, maybe talk to your lecturer, maybe talk to a research colleague, going, where do you think I should go? And think about the different institutions. Maybe go somewhere where a Fulbrighter has never been before. Reach out to Fulbright-Irish and US alums. So yeah, Ruth is going to definitely give you some pointers on where to go. It should make sense to you, which is kind of a quick way of saying what I was waffling on about there. It should just make sense where you're going in the US for your project and for you. And if it makes sense to you, it's going to be really easy to describe to the interview panel why you should be going there. Okay, so quickly jump on the Fulbright Creative Ireland Fellowship. So these are research opportunities in the student category only. So you can apply to the Harry Ransom Centre, Exploratorium, or the Smithsonian, and these institutions are huge. So do have a look through their websites. If this is kind of a field that you think you might be applying through. So we actually have a webinar that goes into more detail, and I'll actually include that on and the email afterwards, where we go into a lot more detail on these 3 fellowships. So have a look through that, and you must seek a letter of support from the host and include that in your Fulbright application. And okay, yeah, so the Fulbright Law Associate Awards. So these are full or partial tuition waivers. They're available at the Maher School of Law in Indiana, Notre Dame, and in Penn. So these are the 3 that we have waivers for, but that's not to say if you get a Fulbright that if you talk to the institution that they may be able to give you a full or partial waiver on the tuition fee for these LLM Law Associate Awards. But these are the 3 that we kind of have links with, because obviously these can be quite expensive. And then we have the Florida Poly STEM Graduate Assistantship and the University of South Carolina MSc and PhD programs. And there's more information about those on our website. Okay, and this is what I touched on earlier. So yeah, so you see the blue and the green boxes here. You can see how they're flipped. So in the review stages, when you've done your application that's getting reviewed by experts in your field, they're looking at your academic record, your project statement, and they're also looking at the cultural engagement and leadership. But it's predominantly the academic record and the project statement. There is what you're doing. Does it have a solid footing? And that's the review stage. And then we get to the interview stage, and that's flipped. I was, basically they'll ask you at the interview. They've looked through your project statement. They're not experts in your field generally. The people on the interview panel, they're going to go give me the elevator pitch of your project statement. They go, yeah, that makes sense. And then it's all about you. They want to get to know you. What are you doing? Why do you want to go? Why do you want to go there? Tell me, I'm not going to tell you the questions they asked now, but exactly. But yeah, it's a lot about that cultural engagement, your outreach to the community. What are you going to do? Are you going to be a leader in the community? What, they don't want you to just, have the head down in the books for 6 months and, not get any of that cultural engagement. It's an academic and a cultural engagement program, and that's not to be underestimated, that both of those things are important. Okay, and the Fulbright Schumann Awards, as I mentioned earlier. So these are more for kind of things that are, research that's kind of looks at relations and policy and EU-US affairs kind of on a global level. So this is quite a high level award. Do talk to us if you are applying for this awards. This is open to applicants from EU member states. Yeah, so it's kind of the intersection of technology and policy. So yeah, if you are thinking to have a nosy through the website, if you're thinking of doing that, it is a separate application, but do talk to us before you apply for this one. And if you're thinking of bringing US colleagues to Ireland, so similarly there are the Student Awards, Scholar Awards. I'm going to talk a little bit about the US Specialist Award, I think, on the next slide. So the US Specialist is, maybe there's an expert in a US institution that you would like to bring short term to NUI Galway. So this is where you would apply for that. I think there's 5 of them per year. So yeah, that would be an expert in whatever field to come and maybe do a short term stint at NUI Galway. Okay. Yeah, as I said, the next slide. So yeah, to address like a critical priority, let's say, can't think of an example off the top of my head here, but if it was, you know, maybe to teach something very specific to a cohort of PhDs or students, something like that, or someone to work on maybe some PhDs very, you know, that they were absolute experts in that field, to think about that award. And also the US awards in Ireland. So we reach out to partners in kind of October to December annually, to renew and set up new US awards. So please contact us to discuss that. Yeah, so kind of next steps. So don't, you know, it can be easy to go, oh yeah, that was interesting, maybe I'll apply for Fulbright. Take some steps. If you just start, you're much more likely to actually apply in the end, because you know people's lives get in the way. Lockdown might be ending, you might be really busy. So, you know, reach out to recommenders, go, oh, would you mind? You know, quick email maybe at the end of this, go, I'm thinking of applying for a Fulbright. Reach out to 3 of them and just be like, oh, just, you know, to sense check, I might be asking you for a recommendation at some point. Select your host institutions. You know, have a think about it. You know, what institution is maybe relevant to some, you know, your research piece or your project statement. Research the Fulbright ethos. That's very important for your application and also for the interview stage. Obviously, follow us on social media and read all my tweets. And if you have any queries, Paula is on the other end of awards@fulbright.ie. Have a look through the website. And yeah, and if there's any information that you can't find on our website, or you just want to have a chat, please feel free to contact us, or Ruth as well. And we're more than happy to chat to you. And with that, I will stop sharing and I will introduce Ruth, who is going to talk about her Fulbright experience.
Thanks, Rowan. Yeah, it's great to have a chance to talk a little bit about my Fulbright experience and kind of formally have an excuse to reminisce on a really great experience. Every time I do this, I think, can I go for another one? What are the rules there? Yeah, so I'll just kind of informally discuss maybe what the process was like for me, what the experience was like, and just basic kind of pointers for when people get in contact with me, the kinds of things I'd be advising or recommending you look at. So I was a Fulbright scholar in the 2016-2017 cohort, and I was based for that time in the Suicide Prevention Research Lab, which is in the School of Medicine in Stanford University. And kind of going back to what Rowan was saying about don't rule yourself out of the race too early. I mean, I was working full-time as a clinician. I completed my doctorate in 2010, and, you know, while I had gotten some publications and I was certainly very involved in research, I was doing that evenings and Saturdays and stuff. It was not my full-time role, and I was very conscious that I was going to really struggle to compete with people who are in full-time academia. So I'm really glad I didn't kind of take myself out of the race too early, and kind of assume that I wouldn't be a right fit. So as I said, I was working as a clinical psychologist in primary care psychology and was very involved, I suppose, in founding a local suicide prevention initiative that involved lots of different stakeholders. And one important part of that was collaborating with researchers and academics in NUIG from both computer science and psychology. And really that collaboration was to meet an immediate need, because I was working in a community where there was quite a high suicide rate, and we needed to think quite kind of creatively, not just about stakeholder involvement, but how we sort of would engage young people, and how we would support people in accessing the services that actually were there. And I suppose in the course of this work, we were able to attract a little bit of funding, and we were able to put some research in play, and we were able to get some publications. But it was all, you know, it was relatively kind of small scale, and certainly I wouldn't have had the time to scale it up in any way, because I had a full-time clinical role, as I said. But I suppose through this research, I became, I suppose, in contact with a lot of suicide prevention researchers all over the world who were were incredibly giving of their time and expertise and very, very supportive. And I suppose when I was doing that kind of annual trawl through what kind of funding could we go for, what could really help expand this research and these projects from something that was very kind of locally orientated to much bigger kind of suicide prevention research that could be more impactful. I suppose I very much kind of kept in contact with people who were experts in the field internationally. So the Fulbright then seemed like a good fit in the sense that I felt it would allow me some protected time to engage in research and really give this potential. Because, as I said, we had been able to attract a little bit of funding. We were able to get some of it off the ground. But I thought this was an opportunity not just to go and see the work and collaborate with people who were leaders in the field and learn from particularly their methodologies and how they were able to do the research, but also that protected time to kind of invest in that. So I suppose in a kind of a practical sense, I attended one of these roadshows. I contacted a researcher I had been in contact with at Stanford and gave a general outline. So what I would say is don't assume you have to have the absolute nuts and bolts of everything lined up, but a general outline of what I was trying to do, what I was trying to achieve, and seeking that kind of that letter of invitation. At the time, that wasn't necessary with your application, but it certainly helped make the application much more tangible. So I would definitely say get on top of that early if you can, and don't forget that in the US, academics are very frequently getting communication about Fulbrights. Fulbright in the US is very, very well known. It's extremely prestigious. It opens an awful lot of doors for people, and certainly any of the higher education institutions that I visited, so both Stanford and then Alabama State University, they were extremely proud to be hosting Fulbrighters. So they were quite supportive of the process. So don't be kind of shy about sending those emails at all, and do it early, I would say, because it will make your application much more tangible. For me, I suppose it was because I was looking at the integration of mobile health technology in suicide prevention. California offered an incredible or unique opportunity in that there was the Suicide Prevention Research Lab, who were leading the way really in terms of randomized controlled trials and including people with suicide risk, which unfortunately doesn't happen as often as we'd like it to happen. And so as clinicians, we're relying sometimes on research to do with interventions that maybe didn't include people who were at risk of suicide. But then obviously geographically, extremely well located within Silicon Valley and access to, I suppose, all of the digital health expertise as well. So it just offered a very kind of unique opportunity that was really important for that research at the time. So yeah, would have attended a roadshow event. I would have contacted researchers, would have contacted Rebecca, who eventually went out to, I spoke to a Fulbright alum. That was really, really useful, really important in terms of just breaking down and demystifying a little bit the process and what's involved, and certainly, later then even the interview process. And then, yeah, just sitting down and finding out more about the Fulbright Commission, the history of it, Senator Fulbright. So just to get a sense of the kind of ethos and the sort of vision that led to the establishment of this award, because certainly for me, the Fulbright application kind of diverts to a certain extent from what we'd be maybe used to in applying for more traditional funding, where I suppose with Fulbright, an awful lot of the focus is on you as a potential Fulbrighter and what that means. So I suppose just to pay attention, I suppose, to that and maybe the history of Fulbright. so in terms of the experience, in late, I think September 2016, I headed out with a spouse, husband who was on remote working, and a 3.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old on a great family adventure. And it was really, honestly, kind of personally and professionally quite kind of transformative. I think one of the things about Fulbright that maybe isn't sold enough, but I think it's been really useful to me, is the Fulbright community. So apart from, so we'll say in Dublin, once you are awarded, there's the gala dinner and there's lots of different meetups and things. But it's just, in my experience, you know, the Fulbright kind of alum community are just an incredibly kind of inspiring and helpful bunch of people to be able to get in contact with. And I've kind of found that before and since, and I think, you know, that's the kind of value added for me of Fulbright, certainly. And when I was out in the States, I think the week I arrived, there was a lunch kind of on campus, and I met lots of different Fulbrighters, and 3 of them who also had small children, which was incredibly useful. Yeah, so I suppose the other piece that maybe, again, you kind of don't know about till you go out there is that, certainly in my experience, you were invited on a Fulbright enrichment seminar, which was like a couple of days in a different institution or a different place. That was incredibly important for me. I thought that was really, really useful, completely left field in terms of my area of interest. And I think, but actually it's hugely informed my work. We went to Montgomery, Alabama, and went to Alabama State University, met with people who had, you know, fought with Martin Luther King, and it was a really, really kind of eye-opening experience in terms of, I suppose, the racism and adversity that people in that part of the world have experienced, and certainly has informed my work as a clinician when I come back in terms of the maybe the racism that's there in plain sight. So I suppose then in terms of from a professional perspective, I mean, it has hugely informed my professional practice, but also my own kind of progression, I suppose. When I went with a very specific picture of what I wanted to do. Unfortunately, I was able to get that research completed, but I think probably what ended up being more enriching was that while I was out there, they were kind of at a very, very busy time in terms of there were 2 clinical trials kind of finishing up. I had never been involved in such large-scale clinical trials, and certainly, as I spoke to earlier, the inclusion of people with at risk of suicide in clinical trials is often, you know, doesn't happen as often as we would like in some ways, and that's with good reason. But I suppose in Stanford, it was really great to be able to see the processes and procedures and the ways in which they were able to make that research safe and inclusive. So it was useful and meaningful to people experiencing distress, but also to kind of clinicians. And so even just the basics of, I suppose, the procedures and the structures that were in place, I really took that with me to not just my own clinical work, but supervision, line management, when I'm teaching. I found that just really, really useful, those experiences. But also just in terms of the types of methodologies that we're using, even just their grantsmanship, I know it's an overused term, but I suppose the biggest output really has been that kind of longer term relationship where, you know, we've now kind of co-authored a number of papers together and been able to work on much broader and more impactful research. So I suppose kind of more recent publication with myself and colleagues in Stanford, and Facebook was on the use of artificial intelligence in suicide prevention research. And so moving much more into the machine learning kind of area and really looking, I suppose, at the use of big data and AI in suicide prevention research. And something that really, at the level that I was working at, which was very much in a clinical area in one geographical place, it completely broadened my horizons and the type of research that I could be involved in and the kinds of collaborations that were possible. Yeah, I'm trying to think, is there anything in terms of sort of advice? I would say just definitely go for it. Take a leap of faith. Every minute you spend on that application, you know, it's ultimately worth it. I think don't rule yourself out too early. It's maybe a broader, it's maybe more open to, you know, it's more of a kind of a broader award than you might think. And so do get in touch with people, definitely get in touch with Fulbright alum. And yeah, I think just go for it would be my general advice. Do look at the different awards though, and what might be a good fit for you. So it's definitely worth going on the website and because all the information really is there in terms of what I think they're looking for when you get to kind of interview stage. So take a bit of time to maybe research the award itself and the kind of ethos of it and the kind of vision behind the initial funding of that award.
Yeah, like I think I definitely concur with that, Ruth. Yeah, one thing we probably don't touch on enough is that it is for all disciplines, and yeah, as Ruth said, don't kind of self-select yourself out, you know, today and just be like, oh, I don't think it's for me. Maybe because I didn't touch on certain subjects, or you know, maybe I have my own bias when I'm talking through the presentation about certain bits and pieces. It is genuinely for all disciplines, and we do mean that. And yeah, and as Ruth said, to talk to alumni. So if you go onto our website, we do have a way to look through alumni, you know, have a look through there and see if there's any people that you might want to reach out to ask for their advice, and obviously Ruth as well. She is your campus ambassador. And there is a question in from someone here about, so they're a third year, so I'll just choose Paula and put you on the spot. So they are in third year in an undergrad, and this is like, this is great. If you're in an undergrad and you're already thinking about Fulbright, you're kind of in the right headspace. But Paul, is it too early to start thinking about Fulbright?
I don't think it's ever too early, especially, so you're a third year of an undergraduate degree, so maybe you're in your third and final year. I'm not sure. If you're in your third and final year, you can definitely apply now to go next year and do your master's, or the first year of a PhD in the States for next year. If you're in the third year of a fourth year or fifth year degree, undergraduate degree, well then yes, it's definitely a great time to get thinking and planning and dreaming about where you want to go in the States, and maybe starting some research. Because as Rowan said previously, Fulbright is postgraduate, so it is for master's and PhD, like Hannah alluded to in her question. But yeah, you can start thinking about applying for your master's the year after next now, if you are in third year of a 4-year or 5-year course.
And then there's the home rule question, which always come out. So their understanding, so my understanding is, Paula, you have to come, so by the letter of the law, you have to come back to Ireland for 2 years, but it could possibly be in the Europe, but it has to be in the European Union. Is that correct? It can't be, let's say, in Australia, or yeah, considering the United Kingdom is no longer, there's always a Brexit question. Brexit and the 2-year home rule, they always get brought up on these things.
Yeah, like as Rowan said, it always comes up, and it is something that people don't like. As Rowan alluded to, even if you get married to an American, even if you have kids in America, you still have to comply with the 2-year home rule. I'm working with the Commission for 5 years, and I was saying to Ruth, we just had a brief catch up before the call, that since certain people were elected into power, the rules tended to get stricter and stricter and stricter. So say 5 years ago, when students and scholars were going to the States, we'd say you have to comply with the 2-year home rule, but you can do it anywhere in the EU. It's getting stricter and stricter and stricter. So perhaps you won't even be able to undertake that 2-year home rule in France and Germany. The UK will not be accepted as a place to undergo the 2-year home rule. Australia, definitely not. But the 2-year home rule, you can definitely still go back to the States and go on holidays and give conferences and get an ESTA. It just means you cannot go back and get a visa to live and work in the US. So as Rowan says, if your plan is to go to the States and stay there forever, then Fulbright actually probably isn't for you.
So it can be cumulative though. So let's say I go back to Ireland for a year and then I go somewhere outside of that. But it's just 2 years that you have to spend in, you know, that's the home rule. It's not that you have to go back and you can't leave the country for 2 years. You know, you're not going to be chained to your desk.
Yeah, luckily it's not that strict. I just see another question from Neve. So Neve says she's undertaking an undergraduate degree in law, and it is possible to apply for an LLM in Harvard or Yale. Actually, she doesn't say LLM, but I'm assuming you mean a master's. Yes, it is. Rowan mentioned the 3 colleges we have agreements with to provide fee waivers. We do not actually have a guaranteed fee waiver with Harvard and Yale. Now, in the past few years, I've had very pleasant experiences where people have been, say, awarded an LLM, and we don't have a fee waiver with that institution. But as Rowan says, kind of Fulbright opens doors. So I have had the very happy experience of someone got an LLM in an institution that we do not have a fee waiver agreement with. But once that host institution saw that that LLM student received a Fulbright from Ireland, they were actually awarded a full fee waiver. But it's definitely worth exploring with whatever institution states you're looking to apply for an LLM with, or any masters with. Will they provide a fee waiver to Fulbrighters, or is there some other scholarship system? And we in the Commission, we get so many applicants from so many wonderful people. We would love to be able to fund more people than we can. Unfortunately, our budgets are limited. We just simply do not have the funds to cover someone's full fees, because the fees could be 60 grand, the fees can be something incredible. Or as Rowan would have touched upon, like our monetary grants are more so for living and travel expenses. So yes, you can apply for an LLM wherever you want in the States. But if I were you, I'd be checking in to see, do Harvard or Yale or wherever you want to go provide a fee waiver.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
sorry,
I think,
sorry, can I just...
And Neve is also asking about the 2-year home rule. Yeah, it can be quite off-putting, but so the idea behind it, I think, is that it is a cultural exchange. So you are going to the US to go to do your piece of research, do your cultural exchange, and then come back and bring that home. So this is kind of to the ethos of Fulbright and kind of the core of it. And, you know, as I mentioned, it was set up in 1946. So this is, you know, twice within the last, you know, 20 odd years, the world had torn itself apart in 2 major world wars. You know, it's this idea that you're going over there to learn about, you know, the culture and the people, because you're a lot less likely to be fighting with someone, you know, that you're you know, it's this cultural exchange. So that's kind of, I think, unless I'm completely mistaken, Paula, that's kind of the idea of the 2-year home rule, to come home.
Yeah, that's totally my understanding. And as well, there's also, they don't exactly want a brain drain as well, that all these fantastic people leave Ireland, go to the States and stay there.
Yeah, they don't want it to be just this method of, you know, okay, I'll just do a Fulbright and then I'll just like stay in the US forever. So it's this idea that you're going to go over there for a stint, learn about and, you know, maybe you will end up in the States further on in your career. But, you know, it's not too onerous to come home, and it's not that you have to spend a block of 2 years staying in, you know, in Ireland. But that is kind of the idea of it. So we do flag it with people quite strongly as well, that is a requirement. But so yeah. Okay, that's just a thank you from me. Okay, so thank you for registering. Thank you for coming. I will be sending on an email with the video and the presentation afterwards. Thanks a million to Ruth for all of your insights into Fulbright. Grace for helping organize this whole thing. Thank you very much. And Paula for fielding the questions. So as I said, do feel free to reach out to us. Do a couple of the steps, you know, reach out to your recommenders. You've heard enough from me anyway. So I think we're going to leave it there. And thank you everyone for attending. See you.
And Ronan, just say a very big thanks from NUI Galway for hosting the webinar this evening, and thanks to Ruth and Paula for your insights. I almost feel like getting on and applying myself, so that's absolutely brilliant. And it was good to hear the human story from Ruth around, you know, I was lovely to hear that she had family when she went, so everything is possible. So guys, get your research hats on, and as Ronan said, start looking at it straight away. Thank you.